guys, my name is Sydney Harrison. My business name is Fresh Start Equine Wellness and Performance, and through that I offer massage work, realignment work, as well as lessons. And the lessons are just focused on basically making your horse the best athlete as possible by focusing on their anatomy, doing different exercises, stretches, that kind of stuff. So I figured for this video series that I would try to do some stretches, exercises, things like that you guys can actually start to hopefully apply into your daily routines, just things to maintain your horse's wellness. And as well, I'll go over some points about like indications your horse might need a massage or some alignment work. But yeah, I was hoping it could be kind of something you guys could get some hands-on knowledge from. So this is my horse Bandit. He is 5 years old and he's the horse I'm using for this leg up challenge as well. He had been coming off of 5 weeks off, so he's also was a little bit out of shape, but he's kind of a lean, athletic kind of guy, so it wasn't too hard at this point to get back into the program. But so a couple things I want to show you first were just some things I include in my daily routine, like before I go and ride my horses. So the first couple are just some different reflexes that I use on the horses, getting them to engage their core muscles. So again, getting them to start firing that muscle memory, to engage their core muscles, engage the proper muscles, as well as helps to loosen up the back and that kind of thing. So I'm just gonna push him over. So for this first one, I'll do it on this side first and then I'll go to the other side so you guys can see it a little better. But so we're gonna ask him to engage his core by going about maybe like 2 to 3 inches behind your cinch area, and with your hands and just pushing straight up. And you're just gonna hold it for about 3 to 5 seconds, and then we'll do 3 reps of it. So we just go behind and we want him to engage his core. And then he'll release it. So those are the exact muscles we're looking for him to use when we're riding. So I'll just do it again over here. And just lifting up his back, but it's actually coming from those core muscles. We'll just do it one more time. And each time with those reflexes, they'll kind of progressively get a little less. That's why you don't want to overdo it. Now the next one I like to do with my horses is from the hind end. So at the base of their tail, so the tail head, you're just going to take your thumbs, or if your horse is a little bit dull, you can always use like dimes or hoof pick just to get a little bit more pressure. So again, you're just going to push against there, and they're going to rotate their pelvis forwards. Scooch it a little bit, so I'm just going to hold the pressure until he stands, and then release. Do it one more time. So I'd like to do those before I ride each time. Then the last little thing I like to do before I ride them, and sometimes I'll do like leg stretches, and I'll go over that in a minute too, either before or after, sometimes both, just kind of depends on how my day's going. But so with the tail, so the tail is a good indication of how the back is feeling, because the tail is just an extension of the spine. So if your horse is tight in their back, chances are they're going to be tight when you go to lift up their tail. Now you got to keep in mind, some horses just really don't like their tails being touched, so obviously that's kind of the exception. But even those horses, if you do this often enough, they'll start to understand and actually like what you're doing. So it might just take a little longer. So you're just going to grab the tail and just start pulling slowly up. He looks like he's nice and relaxed today because there's no resistance there. So I might just do that a few times, and everything's just slow motions and like minute motions, nothing crazy and fast or big sweeping motions. And then for this next one, you're going to go clockwise a circle, and again just small movements, and then counterclockwise. You can do that like a few times back and forth, and that's just helping to loosen up his back muscles, the smaller back muscles. So that's a couple of good ones that I like to do for sure before I ride, because it just gives a good indication too of how your horse is feeling, especially if you do it every time before you ride. You'll have a good indication of, okay, is my horse a little bit cold back, or a little stiff, a little tight, those kind of things. So that way it can help you plan your warm up, like maybe you need a little bit more time at the walk or long trotting them, that kind of thing. Thing I wanted to touch base on with you guys was just about some stretching points. So it's great to stretch your horse for a lot of reasons. It gets them more flexible, more supple, and also it allows you to gauge what's normal for your horse, so you'll have an indication of a problem arising before it actually becomes like a full-blown lameness or something like that. So and I just wanted to touch base also on a couple safety principles to always keep in mind when you're stretching your horse, especially when you're stretching out their legs. So a couple things to keep in mind is obviously always being bodily aware of where you are in position to your horse. So when you can, depending on what stretch you're doing, not being in an area where they can kick you. Now, sometimes certain stretches you do kind of have to be in a vulnerable spot. So in that case, you're just going to make sure that you're not putting your most valuable assets in the fire zone. So like not your head, not your like knee joints, your pelvis area, things like that. Because it's better to obviously get kicked in the thigh than in your face. So things like that, just being self-aware. As well, another safety point is not always horses kicking, but sometimes horses will yank their legs away. So always be aware about where your hips are pointed, because that, if your horse pulls, that's the way you're gonna go. So if, for example, you're stretching a front leg, and they're this way and they yank, and your hips are facing them, you're gonna get torqued sideways, and chances are you can hurt yourself, right? Like hurt your back. If you're stretching a front leg and your legs are positioned forwards, you're gonna go with the motion and less likely to get hurt. So just a couple of things to keep in mind. And a few other little things in terms of actually the stretch itself is just thinking about, the biggest thing I would say is thinking about using soft hands. So just like when you ride a horse, we always aim being really soft and gentle when we apply pressure. It's the same thing with stretching. You'll yield way better results, even if your horse is a little resistant, and you never want to force a stretch anyways, and you don't want to bounce a stretch. So doing an adequate warm-up, so making sure you don't just start loping off right away. Make sure you spend time flexing and bending, getting them supple and soft, and using their body properly. And the biggest point I'd like to make, because there's a million points and I don't want this video to be crazy long, but is you got to gauge your horse, because the biggest thing or the biggest issue I see with horses is that problems start to occur when you're working with a horse that's tired, because then they start to use their body incorrectly. So even if your horse knows how to collect and they're great at that and they're soft, normally they're pretty good. Horses aren't, we all know they're not robots, they're not machines, so every horse has their limits. So if we push them to beyond that, that's when they start using their body incorrectly. That's when they pull muscles. That's when you start getting issues even in their like tendons and ligaments and that kind of stuff. So that's where it comes in, like really important to know your horse's limits, and being able to obviously get them to be able to handle more, but it's obviously a process. So you just have to kind of gauge that on your own. But if your horse starts feeling tired, you're better off to find a good spot to quit and try again, because otherwise you're just getting into a headache, and you can cause physical issues with your horse, which will make it hard for them to do whatever you're asking anyways. So the best equine partner is one that feels great. They'll be willing to work for you and get the job done. So base on with you guys was just some red flags or indications that your horse might need a massage or realignment work. Of course, there's a lot more than just these ones, but I'll just touch base on some of the more common reasons. So, and the biggest one would be changes in behavior, especially if it's things severe as like bucking, rearing, stopping, like having a good work ethic. If you have a jumping horse, if they're like refusing jumps a lot, things like that, is just an indication. Like poor performance is an indication that something's going on. Horses, being prey animals, are masters at disguising problems. So it won't always come up in a full-blown lameness right away. It will often be disguised as little things. Things like not being able to pick up a lead all of a sudden, struggling to bend in one direction, being heavy-legged to pick up their feet, or resistant with getting their hooves trimmed, things like that. So it really just comes down to knowing your horse and what's normal for your horse, because we all know that there's a mental part to training and a physical part, but it's good to know, especially when it's a change, that to get your horse looked at. That way you know if it is a physical thing, you can get it addressed, get it fixed, and if it's not, then you can go and train accordingly to deal with that issue. So I hope that this video was helpful for you guys. I really enjoy sharing my knowledge with people, so if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message at any point. And just want to say I really enjoyed watching everyone's posts about their leg up journey, and I hope that all this craziness blows over so I can get to see some of you guys over the summer. And take care and happy riding.